here. All right.
Well, welcome, Otters, to our second virtual all-school assembly in the age of COVID. It is great to get to be here together as a school community celebrating our Read for the Roses program and Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We have a great assembly ahead of us today with our very, very special guest, Bao Phi, who is back to share another book with us. And I also want to thank Quinn Poole, who's a parent at our school, who is kind enough to translate for us today.
Thank you, Principal Jeremy. Xin chào mừng các em học sinh Otters đã đến với hội nghị trường học lần thứ 2 của chúng ta. Thật vui khi được cùng nhau là một cộng đồng trường học ăn mừng và ghi nhớ chương trình Read for the Roses và tháng dành cho người Mỹ gốc Á Châu, Thái Bình Dương. Hôm nay, chúng ta sẽ có một buổi họp mặt tuyệt vời và đặc biệt với anh Bao Phi. Anh Bao Phi trở lại để chia với chúng ta về một cuốn sách mới và rất là khác.
Hi everyone, Mrs. Ivester here, and I am so excited that we get to have Bao Phi back with us again, which is so cool. I cannot wait to hear his next book that he's going to share with us. And today he's going to share Hello Mandarin Duck, which he mentioned at his first assembly back in January, and now we actually get to hear him read it, which is really awesome. So Bao, thank you for being back with us and connecting with our school and spending your time with us today. We are excited to hear from you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me back. Hello, everybody. Xin chào các bạn. So I'm just going to read a new book and then we're going to talk. And thank you, Huynh, for doing the Vietnamese. I'm thankful that you did it, not me. My Vietnamese is, I'm working on it, but my Vietnamese, let's say, is not nearly as good as it was when I was a child. So this new book I'm going to share with you today is called Hello Mandarin Duck. And incidentally, it is about what it can feel like sometimes to be new to a neighborhood or to a place where you might feel like a stranger. And it is about a duck, but there's also a lot of different kids from different cultures and communities in the book. And they say hello to the duck in different languages. So there are many different languages, Vietnamese certainly, as well as English, but also Spanish, Cantonese, Cambodian, Thai, Russian, Swedish, Hebrew. It's going to be a challenge for your Uncle Bao to read this book to you too. You know, it's actually my first time reading it out loud because of COVID. You know, because of COVID, it's been very difficult to do book releases. This book just came out. So this is going to be my first time reading it to you. I have been practicing the other languages, but I'm not quite good enough to do it off book yet. So you might see me struggling and hesitating a little bit because some of these languages obviously are not languages that I'm used to. And I encourage you to, as we follow along on my screen, to these different words mean either hello or welcome. I encourage you to try to say them with me, but maybe turn your mic off, because if everyone says it along with me, I'm going to get so scared that I'm doing it wrong that it's going to be chaos. I'm probably going to start crying. So, you know, do feel free though to, you know, to say it along with me with the microphone off. And if you do decide to read it on your own, there's a pronunciation guide in the back here, which I will be referring to actually when I read the book. And this was done with a bunch of friends of mine in the community who are actually native speakers of the languages that we feature in here. So for them, it's no problem. They just like rattle it off because that's the language they speak. But for those of us who are not from that language, it might be a little bit harder. So with that being said, let's just go to my book. So I wrote the story. I came up with the characters. I did all the words. My name is Bao Phi. It's good to be here with you. I'm a refugee from Vietnam. I wrote the words. The illustrations are by a young man named Dion MBD. His initials are MBD because he says that his last name is so long that it doesn't even actually fit on his passport. That's how long his last name is. He did the illustrations. I think he did a great job. And I will share my screen so you all can kind of follow along with me here. Right, this one. Almost there, friends. There we go. All right. So this is Hello Mandarin Duck, written by Bao Phi, which is me, illustrated by Dion MBD. And the dedication is for everyone in my neighborhood and everyone in yours. Oh, and you all should know that I don't know if you have May Day there, but May Day and the May Day parade is a very big deal in Minneapolis, in my neighborhood, where it's very political and a lot of people from different communities come and celebrate May Day. And there's a lot of puppets and there's a lot of fancy bicycles, and it's a lot of fun. Hello, happy May Day, Hua and Hui call to their neighbors. Everyone is hurrying to the park for the May Day parade. Look, says Hua. She points to a colorful duck they've never seen in the park before. Ciao Em, Hui says. Hello, little duck, Hua says. The duck totters back and forth. It seems confused. Are you lost? Hua asks the duck. Quack, the duck replies. It ruffles its feathers and kicks its webbed feet. Hua and Hui's friend Willow walks up and sees the duck. Hun mi takoyape, Willow greets her friends. Hun mi takoyape, she greets the duck. This duck seems lost, Hua says to Willow. Maybe we should help it get down to the pond. How do we do that? Willow asks. Maybe with some food, Hui suggests. It might be hungry. Let's get a churro from Louise, Willow says. The three of them walk down the hill to where Louise helps his family sell churros and mangoes on a stick. Hey, Louise, will you please help us? Hui asks. We saw a lost duck. Hui, Hua, and Willow lead Louise back to the duck. It's a mandarin duck, Louise says. He spends a lot of time watching ducks in the park, but he hasn't seen a mandarin duck here before. Bienvenido, Louise says to the duck. Hua holds out a churro. The duck quacks and shakes its tail. It doesn't seem interested in churros. We probably shouldn't feed it anyway, Louise says. I have to get back to the truck. Good luck, duck. Samatar rides up on his bike and skids to a stop. He's on his way to join the parade. So da wall, he says to the duck. We're trying to show this lost duck how to get to the pond, Hua says. Samatar squats down on his haunches and waddles like a duck. Quack, quack, he says. Follow me to your new home, friend. But the duck just preens its feathers. Sophia comes along on her skateboard. The wheels go click, clack, over the cracks in the sidewalk. She kicks her skateboard up onto its back wheels to stop. Swasade, Sophia greets the duck. Can you help us get this lost duck to the pond? Hua asks. Sophia nudges her skateboard toward the duck. Hop on, duck. I'll give you a ride. Quack! The rolling skateboard startles the duck. It flaps its wings and skitters away down the sidewalk. You're heading toward the parade, Sophia calls out. Soon the friends find themselves in the middle of a crowd. Watch out, duck! They try to shoo the duck out of the way as a giant machine made of bikes and drums slowly rolls by. The duck hops onto Hua's shoe for safety. Some neighborhood kids come by, playing instruments. Meet our new friend, Hui calls to them. Hello, Junata waves to the duck. Niao Zhu, Niao Zang, Tu calls out. Bonjour, Obadiah says. Privyet, Alexei shouts. Vanakkam, Sorojini says. The musicians march around the little duck. The duck marches in a circle. They watch some people dressed in colorful feathers dance and play drums. The duck flaps its feathers too. I think the duck is dancing, Sophia says. Careful, ducky, Willow says as an Aztec dancer steps close. The three kids bounce over on their pogo sticks, curious to see what's happening. A new duck, Shalom, Miriam says. Salam, Farah says. Hey, Oscar says. Quack, says the duck, hopping up and down too. We're trying to help it get to the pond, Samatar explains. This way to the pond, duck. Miriam bounces that way on her pogo stick. The duck looks towards the pond, but suddenly a siren stops them all in their tracks. Red and blue lights flash, startling the kids and their new friend. The duck quacks, makes a hop jump, and flaps quickly away. The kids follow. The duck lands. The police car is gone. Everything is quiet. Hundreds of eyes have fallen on them. They are in the parade. This mandarin duck is new to our neighborhood, Hua announces. The kids hear people from the crowd shouting. What are they saying? And here you'll see a lot of the words repeated, ni hao, and some new ones that we haven't heard yet. Ni hao, hello. And those of you who are at home following along, I encourage you to try to say some of these words, bonjour, privyet, or a word that you say at home or in the classroom or to someone other than English. I encourage you to just say that to the screen right now. There's some more words. All right, finished. The duck straightens its neck, stands tall, and begins to march. The friends follow the duck. The parade follows the friends. The duck leads the parade all the way down to the pond. Everyone gathers at its edge. The duck quacks cheerfully and flutters into the calm water. The kids laugh and cheer as the happy duck paddles its feet around its new home. Welcome. All right.
That was so great, Bao. Thank you so much. I feel honored that our school gets to be the first school that you read that book to. That's so cool. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, like it's great that it's your school that focuses on different languages, that it's the first book, because honestly, when I had the idea to write this book, I wasn't sure if I could do it. But after a visit to a school in Minnesota, where I think somewhere where 90% of the kids spoke a language other than English at home, and I told them the idea of this book, the kids got really excited. They're like, "You have to write this book." And so I think it feels like full circle that that I'm reading it for the first time aloud to you all. So it's my pleasure.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. We have some students with us here. We have students from second all the way up to fifth grade. Some are in our neighborhood program and some are in our dual language program, and they have collected some questions to share with you. So Naya, let's go ahead and start with you. Would you like to share your first question?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Sophia in kindergarten wants to know, what grade did you like most in school?
That is a great question. So, wow. Fifth grade was pretty awesome from what I remember. Fifth grade was pretty awesome. I remember fifth grade being both kind of like very challenging and fun. It wasn't easy, but I remember I have good memories of fifth grade as well. So that's my final answer. I'm just gonna say fifth grade. And then if I had to choose something, it would be like an end year. So my senior year at high school was pretty fun because by then you were basically like just loafing around, and saying goodbye to your favorite teachers and your favorite friends and stuff like that. But fifth grade was pretty cool. Back then we didn't have this is going to sound crazy, but we didn't have mobile devices, not a lot of screens. So it was like a lot of books and trading cards and Dungeons and Dragons, that type of thing. But it was a good time. Yeah, great question.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer. Hudson, we're going to turn it over to you. Hudson's in third grade, and he has a question to share.
Rowan in second grade was wondering, have you been able to write during COVID?
Wow, what a question. I have been writing a little bit, and you would think that like it actually goes in spurts. And so there are times when I'm writing a lot, and then there are days when I'm like, I don't want to do anything except, play video games or watch television or, like cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner for my kid and clean up. Some days I write a lot, and some days I'm just doing the bare minimum of what I can do to get by, which I'm guessing is the vast majority of us. I will say that I have a fourth children's book coming out, and the final draft of the fourth book is due next week. And really, at this stage, it's really like looking, to make sure exactly every word that I have put into the book is the exact word that I want. That's where I am. So I'm not super worried about it because a lot of the hard work has already been done. Now it's just making sure that there are zero mistakes in it. So yeah, here and there I've been trying to write. That's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that book for sure. All right, we're going to turn it over to students in our dual language program, and Pearl has 2 questions to read. You want to go ahead and do your first one, Pearl?
Arlie in third grade is wondering, why do you write the books that you write?
That is a really good question. Thank you for asking. Let's just focus on my children's books, although they are kind of connected to why I also write poetry. I'm a father, and I think it's important for every one of us to learn about as many different kinds of people as we can, right? As many different types of families, cultures, as we can. So, that means racially, that means, Black families, Native American families, Pacific Islander families, Arab families, Latinx and Chicanx families, white families. It also has to do with like gender, and so like families with 2 moms, families with 2 dads, single parent families, et cetera, all of these things. I think it's really important for all of us to try to learn and understand and hear stories from as many different types of people, from different cultures and different ideas of belonging as possible. Unfortunately, I think that it's still very difficult to learn about Asian American history in particular in this country. Like we'll learn about culture, which is fine, line dances and food, like all of that stuff is very important. But a lot of people don't know that, for instance, that, some of the most instrumental people in the struggle for equality for workers' rights, for example, were Filipino people who are Asian American, right? The stereotype of Asian people is like, oh, we just got here and we're all doing fine. But really, like the great grape strikes of that Dolores Horta and Cesar Chavez were also a part of. Those great people was half Asian American. Larry Itlang, who was a Filipino, was a leader on the Asian side of that, and it was a multiracial movement, right? A lot of people don't know that. They don't know that Asian American people have a history in this country of standing up for what's right, right? And I think that if people don't know that about our people, they can have very harmful thoughts about us, right? And there are a lot of ignorance about us, especially now with the increased number of unfortunate hate crimes against people who look like us. ignorance can lead to some very bad things. In particular, I thought that it was very difficult to find stories that represented the struggle of working class refugees, particularly from Vietnam, like my family. And so I wrote one, and I wrote the first children's book primarily because I wanted my child to have a book with a story that respected the story of her grandparents, right? My parents, that I felt really sacrificed so much and endured so much pain, not just in Vietnam, but against racism here in America as well. Like, I feel like their story is often ignored and unheard. I wanted my daughter to have a story that reflected that, the beautiful, struggle for equality and a better life. That's why I wrote my first children's book. I knew that if I ever got a chance to write another children's book after that, I would want to address bullying. And so my second children's book is about a Vietnamese girl that has two Asian American moms, who's bullied at school for having queer parents, for having Asian American parents, for having female parents, for being a girl, all of that type of stuff. And then after I wrote that, I knew I wanted to write a third children's book. If I had the opportunity, I would want to address immigration and deportation, right? The unjust immigration policies that hurt families like mine, and families not at all like mine, honestly, right? And that's why I wrote Hello Mandarin Duck. Because if you notice the duck, right? The duck doesn't belong there, and everyone can kind of tell. But the important thing is all these different kids from all different cultures and walks of life from the neighborhood, instead of being cruel to it and trying to get it away from them, they actually try to welcome it, right? And that's really what I think would make a better world for all of us. Adult, like you kids, you probably already feel that way. It's us adults actually that need to remember, right? That our world and our country becomes stronger when we welcome one another through difference. But that's something that I kind of keep writing about. And then my fourth children's book, spoiler alert, I wrote it during this time of COVID, and that Asian American people were being scapegoated for the virus, and there was so much hate for us, against us, that my fourth children's book is actually a poem. It was originally called "You Are Not a Virus," and it's specifically for Asian American kids to kind of celebrate your strength and your beauty in a time when there's just so much ignorance and violence directed towards us. So I have different reasons for writing all the books, but essentially it is to add to the conversation about Asian American people, for us and also for people who aren't us. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Pearl, you have a second question to ask. Go ahead.
Olivia in 4th grade asked, how has COVID affected you, both in good ways and bad, as an Asian American?
Oh, that's a great question. So we already talked about it. It was a very tough year for me, not just because of COVID, but because of I don't know how many of you kids have heard about this, but George Floyd was a black man who was murdered by racist police not too far away from where I live, and not too far away from where my child went to daycare and summer school for the vast majority of her childhood. And all of this is happening while COVID is happening, and there's all this violence towards our people. And then on top of that is COVID, right? Like we have to wear masks and be at home and try to be safe just like everyone else, right? But on top of that, as an Asian American person, dealing with this idea of violence, not just towards me and my family, but also my parents, right? Because a lot of the attacks were happening against elders. And I think what was especially painful is that even as all of this was happening, a lot of people refused to call it racism. They refused to call it racism. And again, that goes back to what I was saying before, that people, because they don't think that racism exists against Asian people, even when these terrible things happen, people still can't wrap their heads around it and just call it what it is, which is painful racism. Like, let's work on it. You know, we're human beings, we have flaws. Like let's call it racism and let's try to work against racism. That's been really hard. It's been really hard in my brain, and it's been really hard in my heart, you know, to deal with that. So that's been hard. I guess the good part of it is like my kid is doing at-home learning, and even though we drive each other nuts sometimes, it's actually kind of nice to be able to spend more time with one another. You know, you know, while we're learning and I'm working from home, my kid's learning. We just spend more time together. So I guess if there's a silver lining there, it's I get to spend more time with my kid.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer, Bao. Justin is with us from 4th grade, and he has the next question for you. Go ahead, Justin.
Jasper in 4th grade asked, how do you decide on the theme of each book?
That's a great question. So usually, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you know, I knew what the theme was for each book, but I didn't know what the story was. So for instance, the first book, I knew the theme. I would want to tell a story that honored my parents, right? But what's the story? What specific story do I tell? And that's when I thought, after a while, I thought about, you know, my dad used to take me on these fishing trips when I was young. And it wasn't for fun, it was for food, right? And my dad would try to teach me survival skills, like how to start a fire and like that type of thing. And I was like, maybe that would be a good story if I could figure out how to tell a kid's story. And so that's how I came up with the different pop. Again, my second book, I knew that I wanted to write a book about bullying. That's the theme, right? I knew I wanted to address the theme, bullying. But what's the story, right? I didn't know what the story was. And I was with my child in the snow here in Minnesota. And for some reason, she was stomping around in her moon boots, making tracks and just like chanting, my footprints, my footprints. And she was just having a grand time. And I thought that was so cute. And then I thought about it later and I thought about, hey, what if I created a character who's bullied at school and she creates footprints and imagines that they are footprints of different like animals and mythological beasts that she can imagine, right, to deal with these hurtful feelings of bullying. Third book, I knew the theme would be immigration and deportation, being a refugee. But again, what's the story? And I struggled until I remembered a duck that I saw once in the park that was it made its home by a broken water fountain, like a puddle. And we would feed the duck and like hang out with it. But it would look so out of place. And I remember sometimes wondering, like, I wonder who's nice to this duck, and I wonder if anyone's being mean to it, you know, because it's new here and it looks so out of place. And you know, like I could kind of see an analogy from when my parents were refugees and new to this country, and my family were refugees, and how some people were nice and some people weren't. And so that's how I came up with the story. So I hope that answers the question.
Awesome. Thank you. We have 2 5th graders here with us today, and Hope will go ahead and hear from you first. Go ahead.
Okay. Sterling S. in 5th grade wants to know, were you bullied in school? And if so, how did you handle it?
Oh, all the time. I was bullied a lot in school, and I was also just bullied a lot in the neighborhood. I think, and I, you know, like I was the youngest in my family, and so I was a very bookish kid, and so I dealt with it by reading a lot of books, reading a lot of comic books, as a way to kind of escape a lot of the hurt feelings that I had. I would kind of imagine myself being like a superhero or stuff. And you know, like I know now like Marvel like owns the world basically. Like superhero movies own the world, right? But when I was a kid, you were a nerd for reading comic books. Like people would pick on you and make fun of you for reading comic books because that was nerd stuff. And nerds were the opposite of cool. Like it's very different now, right? It's very different now. Um, but that's how I dealt with things, like reading books, imagining myself being somewhere else. And I also benefited from being pretty fast, to tell you the truth. I could run pretty fast, so a lot of times I would just run away, to tell you the truth. I had older siblings who like studied martial arts, and you know, they had very different reactions to dealing with the environment than I did. Let's put it that way. But me, I was the bookish one. I was the one who buried my nose in books and comic books, and I held. That's how I dealt with it. Spent a lot of time in the library.
Javi has 2 questions for us. Javi, I'll go ahead and have you read your first one. Thanks for being so patient.
Augustine in first grade is wondering, what authors did you like the most when you were a kid?
Okay, so just when I was a kid, right? So just when I was a kid, I really loved you know, C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I like Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit. I like Judy Blume. I like Beverly Cleary, all of those writers. And then comic book writers, those names won't make any sense to you. But there was a comic book writer who wrote the X-Men comics, and he was kind of known for being like one of the first comic book writers that would write comic books almost like it was a soap opera, And so like before him, most comic book writers, like one comic book would tell a story and that was kind of it, right? Even if it was the same hero. Whereas Chris Claremont, who wrote for X-Men, he would like, oh, this stuff happens and it's just one part in a 10-part story, So he kind of was really good at like writing serialized stories. So I really liked him when I was a kid. And then, as I got older and started reading poetry and novels, my interests got much more diverse. I read more women, I read more people of color, indigenous authors, Asian American authors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when I was a kid, anything that had to do with Greek mythology, King Arthur, and the Knights of the Round Table, if Harry Potter was back then, that would have been my jam. But I was a kid long before Harry Potter. So, but all of that stuff I really enjoyed. Yeah.
Awesome. Javi, do you want to share the last student question? All right, go for it.
From James and Sage in 4th grade, is it hard to be an Asian American author, and what challenges do you face?
Oh, absolutely. Gosh, how do I say this? I think that it's hard being a particular kind of Asian American author. Let me put it this way. I think that sometimes in our Western culture, people can kind of put us into boxes depending on who we are, right? So if you're a woman, there's a box. If you're black or white and male, gay, straight, bisexual, you get put into these boxes, right? And sometimes people only support you if you come out of that box. Does that make sense? So, and for all of us, it's different. So my box is different from even like a Vietnamese woman, right? And that box is different from like a gay Vietnamese person or a gender nonconforming Vietnamese person. So we have all these boxes, but sometimes we only think, oh, a person who fits that box can only say this one thing and I will enjoy that one thing, right? If you are in that box, but you don't say those things, you can kind of get in trouble depending, one, you can get in trouble, or two, people can kind of ignore you. And, like we live in a society where we have to make money to pay the bills, right? And so it's not just like, follow your own voice, that's fine. But if you can't pay the bills, if you don't meet the expectations of what people put on you, it can be very hard for you, right? If you go against the grain and say, actually, I have something else to add to the conversation. I don't want to be in the box that you put me in. There are times when you might not get the same level of support, right? As someone who says stuff that is very just kind of like relaxing and easy to take in, right? But if you don't say that stuff, then the world never changes, and the boxes never change. And so sometimes it can be very hard to make those decisions, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. Bao, I can't thank you enough for these inspiring and thoughtful and really honest answers. I feel like there's so much that we can learn from you as a whole community, both as staff and parents and kids. So I just can't thank you enough for all that you said. And you'd be welcome to come hang out and read in our library any day. I wish we could see you in person, but it's amazing that we get to have these virtual assemblies with you. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. Can I plug one last thing?
Of course.
I just thought of it. So if any of you at home are curious about my kid, who I've been talking about a lot, it just so happened that me and my kid were featured, and the Duck book were featured on the Today Show this morning, called in a segment called Dad's Got This, and I'll put a link here. It says chat is not available at this time. Maybe I'll email your teachers and they can choose to share that link for you. You know, they cut out a lot of the funny things my kids said, unfortunately, but you know, there's some cool stuff happening in that segment. If you all are interested in learning more about me and the kid I've been talking about all day.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
That would be amazing. Congratulations on that. That's super cool. Wow. Jeremy, I think I'm going to turn it over to you as we wrap up our Read for the Roses program. And so, Bao, when you came the first time, that was our kickoff for our Read for the Roses that we've done throughout the rest of this year. And today is the ending of our program with you being here today. So, Jeremy, I'll let you take it over and explain how we're going to wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you, Bao. I really appreciate you being here and really being a role model for our own Vietnamese community. It's great to have you. And of course, anytime you want to come out to Portland, come on. We'll find a way to put you up and feed you as much food as you need.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank the PTO for all the hard work with this program, tracking student readers, the prizes, the game boards, getting everything translated. But today, students, today is the last day to bring those game boards back to school to get your reading minutes counted and the prize pickup. So that's today between 3 and 5 at the gym door. There's a table there.
Thật sự rất là cảm ơn anh Bảo hôm nay đã có thời gian đọc sách và cho tất cả hội cho phụ huynh và các em. Và xin cảm ơn PTO đã làm việc chăm chỉ cho chương trình, giúp ghi lại những sách đọc của các em học sinh, giải thưởng và làm bằng bảng trò chơi. Hôm nay là ngày cuối cùng những ai có thể nộp bằng bảng trò chơi để tính số phút để được giải thưởng từ 3 giờ cho tới 5 giờ chiều. Your turn, Jeremy.
All right, and students, next Wednesday, that's June 2nd, for those of you that use a calendar, from 5 to 6:30, there will be a celebration for anyone who participated in our Read for the Roses program, which is probably almost everyone. A lot of pages were read. So come to Rose City Park, not Rose City Park School, but Rose City Park, the park on 62nd and Tillamook, down the road from the school. And the PTO will be there to hand out raffle prizes, announce our top readers for the school, and have some Otter Pops to go. So if you need to turn in your reading minutes virtually, you can do that via email at events@rosecityparkpto.org. And Quinn, I guess it's back to you.
Thank you. Thứ Tư tuần sau, ngày 2 tháng 6, từ 5 giờ cho tới 6 giờ rưỡi chiều, sẽ có một buổi lễ ăn mừng cho bất cứ ai tham gia chương trình. Hãy đến công viên Rose City Park, cách trường ở đường 62 và Tillamook. Không phải là trường học Rose City Park mà là Rose City Park á, ở đường 62 và Tillamook. PTO sẽ trao giải sổ số thông báo ai là siêu đọc sách đệ nhất để được giải hàng đầu của chúng ta trong trường, và sẽ có một số trò chơi và ăn vặt giống như là Otter Pops. Nếu ai cần nộp phút đọc sách, phụ huynh có thể làm điều này qua email events@rosecityparkpto.org. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming to our assembly. Thanks everybody for a great Read for the Roses program. A big shout out to Terry Proctor, our PPS video guy who made this whole thing possible. And of course to Beth Ivester, greatest librarian in all of North America. And of course, Bao Phi, thank you for joining us. We are truly honored, and what a great way to close out our celebration of Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and our Read for the Roses program. So go Otters! Thanks everybody.